Okay, for the quest, and it is a quest because it's larger than a quiz and bigger than larger than a quiz and smaller than a test. So we start here with our homework. After the first test, you have project research, you have solar decathlon. You're not going to be tested on any of that. Okay, so don't even worry about that at this point. You do have omnivore questions too, and you did peer evaluations on that, critiqued it, but the types of things that are being asked on there are things that you should definitely review and keep in mind how to answer a free response question. We began the decomposition lab. Certainly, the results of your lab are not going to be anything that I'll be asking you about, but what is decomposition? What are decomposers? The handout that you have, the complex biochemistry of compost, you should review. You do not need to know the specific names of certain kinds of decomposers, but absolutely the fact that fungi are decomposers and bacteria are decomposers, not all of them, but many of them. And there's also on the back of that handout is an energy flow in the composting food chain, another example of a food web. And since we've covered food webs recently, it's a good thing to take a look at. No memorization of a specific food web, but certainly examples of food webs. So from there, you had the screencast on ecosystem energy flow. Anything in that screencast is fair game. We set up the leaf packs out in Stony Run because that's an ongoing lab and we've only just started it by setting it up. That is not included, so I will not ask you about macroinvertebrates and how they are indicator species for the health of streams and things like that. That will definitely come later. Ecological symbiotic relationships. You had both this video segment that you took notes on. You had the handout that gives you examples of ecological relationships, and you need to be familiar with those. Then you have, all right, eating lower at a lower trophic level activity that we did in class. The math was not easy on that, and if I ask you to do math similar to that, it won't be as complicated, but certainly figuring out, calculating the change in energy that's available from one level to another, the 10% rule. You have the handout on ecological pyramids, and be able to analyze either the shape of the pyramid or the numbers involved in the pyramid. It could be the pyramid of numbers, pyramid of energy, or pyramid of biomass. Certainly, the types of questions that you're asked all should point to the fact that the base of any of these pyramids are going to be the autotrophs, or also known as the producers, and why it is that they have the greatest amount of energy. How does the energy end up being quote unquote wasted as heat? That goes back to that screencast earlier. All right, the symbiotic relationships I already mentioned, and so that leads us to the niche. What is the basis of a niche? What are all the, I'll never ask you to tell me every aspect of a niche. I can't possibly ask you that, but certainly I could ask, give me some abiotic factors that contribute to a niche and biotic factors that contribute to a niche. You need to know Gauss's competitive exclusion principle, what that has to do with niches. Um, Predator-prey relationships, the fact that predator-prey relationships are actually healthy for an ecosystem if they're in balance. And I know that the second period class, Gilman students left early, and I had not finished talking about that handout, so I will save that for the very end of the screencast. So if you don't need to listen to that, you don't have to. So I'll come back to that particular handout, predator-prey interactions. You did the activity where you had to calculate the exponential growth of the bacteria, the differences between a J curve and an S curve, certainly what a carrying capacity is, and also all the rules about graphing that you should be comfortable with and familiar with at this point as a senior in high school, but from the looks of it, you needed a little reminder, some of you, about setting up graphs and labeling them. You then have the concept of R selection versus K selection, and how that can lead to survivorship, predominantly type 1 survivorship curve versus type 3 survivorship curve. If you know both of those, then anything in between is going to be a type 2 survivorship. And finally, how to calculate population change. It could be population growth, so population could be expanding, population could be shrinking, but the B plus I equals D plus E. You have to know what B, I, D, and E all mean. That basic calculation, which is very, very simple. Be able to do calculations with that. Certainly know how to calculate a rate for any kind of question. So that's the general gist of the quest. I will talk a little bit more about this predator-prey interaction handout for those of you that weren't there to review the predator-prey. The reason you have all of those peaks and valleys and it's still a comfortable relationship in an ecosystem is that they keep each other in check. That is why it is a balance. There is no carrying capacity listed or drawn on this graph for this handout, but you should certainly be able to draw a line and come close to what the carrying capacity would be. The lag time has to do with the difference between the peaks of the hare and the peaks of the lynx. And that's because even when the hare population starts to increase and the lynx can eat all those additional hare, they still need time to reproduce. And usually large mammals like the lynx will have a longer period of time between giving birth, so there is that lag time. And number three, there was a question about the term palatable, the availability of palatable food. That means food that they want to eat. So for the hares, let's say if there's a drought and there's not much grass, the hare populations won't have as much to eat. Their population will drop, and so that can then have an indirect impact on the lynx. And that's not, they're not, the hares aren't being controlled by the lynx, they're being controlled by the lack of food, but that also has an impact on the lynx. So, if any of you have questions, specific questions prior to the quest, please feel free to email me. I will check my email as late as 9 o'clock on Wednesday, but no later. And then I get here at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'll be here at that time Thursday.